The Cold Omaha Podcast Network.
Hell yeah, let's get Stinko.
Welcome, Giles and the Boys Podcast. I am Giles Sparrow. Across the table from me is Ben Remington.
Hello.
And Ben, this is a first in the 105 episodes of the podcast.
What's that?
Where my beverage of choice is water.
Really? You've never? One time?
I mean, I'm sure it was, a side.
Yeah.
But I think this is a first.
I'm trying to think now that jogs my mind a little bit, yogs my mind a little bit.
I believe it's jogging or yogging. It might be a soft J.
Have we ever recorded with you super hungover? I don't know that we have.
I'm sure there's been a few.
As many times as we've recorded on a Sunday, you would have thought that...
I just probably hit it.
Well, you were probably in the middle of hair of the dog. There's that, too.
Yeah, true. No, we are recording on Monday night this week because I opted to continue my day drinking extravaganza yesterday after the Twins game with a Minnesota United game. So that is why we are a day late.
You are a glutton for punishment.
I like beer.
I thought you were going to say like sports or soccer.
That too.
Or
Those two.
Friends. No.
You know what? Yesterday was actually a really good sports day in the fact that a team I like did something good.
Yeah.
Liverpool needed to win on the last day of the year.
Yeah.
To qualify for the Champions League next year. And through the first 44 minutes of the half, you kind of had this sinking, this is going to end terribly feeling. Because Arsenal, the team that was chasing them, was already up. And if they had won and Liverpool had just tied, Liverpool would have been bumped.
So this is like this is relegation, right? Or no, is it different?
No, it's different.
So they're both in the Premier League still, right?
Right. They're still there.
Get bumped up into the...
Liverpool will just play in the Champions League next year in addition to the Premier League.
Gotcha.
But they were playing a team that was already relegated, Middlesbrough.
Oh.
And it took them 45 minutes to score in the first half, which was awful. But thankfully the beer was already going. No, they won, and it was, as we were walking to the Twins game after, it was weird thinking a team just did a good thing. So that was exciting.
Yeah, I watched a little bit of the Minnesota United game on my television set, and I fell asleep, so I didn't. And that's not even a commentary on soccer, but I was really tired and I fell asleep because I had spent all afternoon putting together a fun and exciting thing for next week. So it was I watched a little bit of that, and it seemed like the lower bowl was pretty filled at TCF.
Yeah, it was.
LA Galaxy, so that's a pretty big team.
It was
coming in, right?
It was pretty loud in the second half. It was a good atmosphere. And there's a photo of me that is very on brand.
Yes,
as our friend of the podcast, Dan Mick, took from his perch on the field, behind the goal line, his favorite place in the world, as he'll tell you, behind the goal line.
Oh, so you get really good. He doesn't really good pictures there.
Oh, he's yelling at his listening device right now. But all right, enough soccer talk to scare away what listeners are still left, because I think everyone bugged out for the summer.
That's okay. It happens.
Yeah, that can be expected. Well, Twitter has seemingly checked out, except for last Tuesday when they all came roaring right back when the Niederreiter-Dumba trade discussions cropped up.
Yeah.
After a report from Elliot Friedman, or in his 30 Thoughts, he had mentioned that the Wild were, getting calls on Niederreiter and Dumba, and Michael Russo followed it up the next day that, from Chuck Fletcher himself, essentially said, I'm listening, but there's as he kind of said, there's a difference between listening and, actively shopping. Yeah,
I read that interview from Russo with Fletcher, and it was fairly candid, but at the same time, it also extremely, extremely vague, which you would kind of expect out of an NHL GM. 2 weeks before an expansion draft, and 2 weeks before the end of the season, or 3 weeks before the end of the season, basically. So, it was just like, we're getting phone calls on guys. He did basically say he's not calling anybody. He's not shopping anyone, which is kind of good to hear, for apologists such as ourselves. They're not looking that they're not looking to get rid of team players from this team, aside from possibly some maneuvering, and coinciding with the expansion draft. So, it was an interesting article to read. What Chuck sounded like he had a lot of irons in the fire, but I think that's just kind of always the case. If you ever played in any kind of fantasy league, you might seem like you have a lot of irons in the fire. Nothing really happens.
I was a little freaked out at first.
Yeah,
that can be expected, especially us bloggers that love Niederreiter and Dumba, but
the idiot fringe of the blogosphere is what you're talking about.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay,
but I thought about it a little bit more, and from what I remember of the weekend, I pondered on it a little bit. But I'm not opposed to moving one of them, but don't just move one of them just to, kind of shake up the status quo and make a trade just to make a trade like Edmonton did with, Taylor Hall for Adam Larson.
For justice.
Don't do that. Make a trade that genuinely makes your hockey team better.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm sure you could, you could get probably a good player for, a guy like Dumba, who would, a young defenseman who has a ton of upside. You could probably get a good forward for him if you can find the right deal, depending on what's out there.
Well, his name was one that was thrown around in the Ryan Johansson sweepstakes last season, and aside from his exploding thigh, I think that probably that looks like that could have been a decent move if it had the Wild pulled the trigger on that. They could have been an interesting trade, and it is interesting because it's basically, we've talked about this a zillion times, you're going to lose one of the three with Brodin, Scandella, Dumba. And so if Fletcher has decided, for whatever reason, that he's going to protect, say Brodin or Scandella, and he's going to expose Dumba, this is basically him saying, well, I'm going to, I don't want to expose Dumba. I don't want to lose him for nothing. I want to get something in return, because he's a commodity. He's a young commodity. So maybe that's what this is. Maybe it doesn't sound like he's shopping him, but maybe he's willing to, move some things around. Maybe he's, I don't know, maybe he's willing to do some kind of creative trade when it comes to, Las Vegas being involved somewhere, some way, somehow. I don't know. It's really tough to kind of play fantasy owner, to play rumor mill and try to figure out what's going to happen. But I'm with you on that, where maybe there is a trade out there, and I said that too. As much as I would have liked to keep this team together, and as much as I think they're going to keep this team together, I don't think you turn down a trade that makes your team better. I think if you are presented with a trade that can make your team better, especially in the short run for the Wild right now, I think you do it. And trading Nino Niederreiter might be that kind of trade too. I mean, we all love Nino, but I think he's I don't know if he's more than a second liner at his peak. I don't know if maybe he's just a merely good first line type guy. If you can get a good return on him, and maybe that kind of changes things a little bit for the expansion draft too, maybe you do it. I don't know. They certainly have a lot of draft picks to recoup, so there's that too.
And I wouldn't make a trade to move up in the draft this year into the first round.
No, I wouldn't.
I saw Dallas shopping the number 3 pick, or potentially shopping it, and I'm wary of that because it's a weak draft, and as I've said many times, I'm still very much on board with the Martin Hansel trade because they gave up a first round pick for him, and it's a weak draft. Sure, because it's Minnesota sports, we're probably going to look back at whoever Arizona takes with the 23rd overall pick and go, that's why Chuck Fletcher was the worst, because they probably will draft some kind of all-star forward.
Of course.
But I wouldn't do that. I'm also just scouring HF boards right now to find a trade to throw out there, because I know you love that.
I do and I don't, and it's really tough. And I've seen a lot of mock trades and all that kind of stuff, and it's a really hard thing to do. And I've written an article like that, not an article like, here's what the Wild should do. I've even put together articles where it's like, well, here are some options. Even that is really hard to do. It's really hard to put together a trade. Basically, every trade that you put together that you think is even remotely feasible, somebody's going to come along and be like, you're an absolute idiot. Why, something to that effect. So, I mean, I understand. I don't know. It all sounds ridiculous until it actually happens. I mean, if you were perusing HF boards last June or last late May and you come across PK Subban for Shea Weber, you're probably going to throw your computer in the trash. But it happens.
Would you... we're just spitballing here because we have a lot of time to kill. Would you put some kind of a trade together involving Dumba for Jonathan Drouin, who could potentially be out there?
That's an interesting one. I might look into it. Yeah, I think Drouin is probably a guy that is maybe worth Dumba. I'm not... The thing that would concern me is that they might want more than Dumba, and that might get a little sketchy. But yeah, I wouldn't be afraid of it as long as it's Dumba and not much else. Basically, I don't think Dumba. As much as that was another trade that was thrown out was when the Drouin sweepstakes were on and never actually happened. Dumba's name was thrown out there as well, and a lot of people kind of poo-pooed that, but in hindsight, Drouin is a very talented player. So I don't know. It's interesting. On the whole, I think I don't like the idea of dealing Dumba necessarily because you're going to lose a defenseman to Vegas, it seems, and so I don't. I don't like that. I don't like it unless there's something else that makes sense there, because otherwise you're losing 2 of your top 5 defensemen, essentially.
We'll have a podcast when we get closer that's full of HF boards kind of trades. Kind of the other, I guess kind of the other thing I worry about is you trade a Niederreiter who's due for a big raise this year to clear out some cap space so that you'd have some money for maybe the free agent market. And that would make me wary of them, the Wild, signing a guy like, let's say, TJ Oshie. And now this was kind of a concerning trend before an article was released on that topic yesterday, because I've seen a few other people in the Twitter sphere kind of bringing up how the Wild could benefit from TJ Oshie, but I strongly disagree. And I looked it up today, and it seems like just about 2/3 of the season TJ Oshie played with Alex Ovechkin and Nicholas Backstrom.
Yeah.
In Washington. That was the line.
Right.
Ovechkin, Backstrom, Oshie.
Yeah.
And Oshie greatly benefited from that as he shot over 20% this year. And now, don't get me wrong, he's a good player.
Sure.
But he's a good complementary piece.
Yeah.
He's not the missing piece that this team needs.
No.
If you bring him here, you're just bringing another, secondary second liner that, they don't need.
Yeah.
That's not a need for this summer. And yeah, he elevated his play with Ovechkin and Backstrom, but those are otherworldly players.
Right.
The Wild have none of those. They don't have an otherworldly player that they could elevate Oshie's game. So I'm very much against it, and I hope somebody else massively overpays for his services.
No kidding.
But I wanted to take the 2 minutes and address that, because he's also, I believe, 30 years old. And that's another thing the Wild don't need, is an over 30-year-old player on the way down.
Well, and the contract it's going to take to get him is going to be, it was like what we saw with Backus last year, or Raposo. You're going to sign a 5-year deal. There's just no way around it. And I think it was Dmitry Filipovich. He wrote an article recently about how some sucker for a GM is going to massively overpay TJ Oshie because he cashed in on being paired with Backstrom and Ovechkin all year. And we saw from his results in St. Louis, where he also played with good players on occasion, but for the most didn't play with as good of players, he wasn't that good. Everyone remembers him in the Olympics. That's about it. Let's be honest. TJ Oshie is not, he's not an all-star caliber player. He might make an all-star team every now and then, but let's not kid ourselves into thinking that he's some kind of elite scorer or something. He's not. He had a good year because he was on a very, very good line, on a very, very good team.
Capitals were good. No, I forgot.
He was on a very, very good regular season team, and yeah, it just let's not, and the whole one of us thing factors in, and it's just like,
but he's not one of us.
No, I know. He was, he's a transplant at best, and then he was a fighting hawk or whatever those things are called. And
yes, that is technically what they are called.
That is what they're called. Now, the alumni, are they fighting? Are they still the old name? Can they say they were a fighting?
I believe
blank?
Technically they have to be called Fighting Hawks alumni.
Yeah, well, you're probably right.
I'm just saying that those are the rules. I don't make the rules. I just enforce the rules.
It was court ordered, You can't get much more official rules than that. Right. This isn't like an unwritten rule in baseball. This was like a U.S. court order thing. Yeah, so anyway, yeah, Oshie, don't fall all over yourselves at begging the Wild to sign him, because it's not a good move. And yeah, maybe we're putting a little bit too much weight into fancy stats, but if you look at the fancy stats, and I think this is an area where you use them. This is an area where you determine, where you use fancy stats to pick between players, and Nino Niederreiter blows Oshie away. And Nino Niederreiter is kind of a fancy stat darling. I get that, and maybe he's, catches heat from that from some unnamed people in the blogosphere, but I think that this is where you use those kind of statistics and determine that Nino Niederreiter playing on, a good team, playing on lines with not nearly as talented players, still puts up better, peripheral numbers than TJ Oshie did. I don't care how many goals he scored, because they were gift wrapped to him by two, generational talents.
Yeah, so we'll probably dive more into that too as we inch closer to free agency, and we kind of figure out what the Wild are feeling in that regards. Right now it's just a huge crapshoot. That's so far away when you think about, the draft and then the expansion draft and then trade season, which is going to probably be heavily influenced by the expansion draft, and then we get to free agency. But what's nice, it happens all in about 10-day span. So,
yeah, I really like how hockey condenses. They don't really screw around.
It's nice.
Yeah, you've got the baseball offseason tends to drag quite a bit. The NFL offseason, I don't think there is an NFL offseason anymore, at least according to several media outlets. But hockey, they do it, boom, boom, done. The cup ends, you've got, maybe 2 weeks, and then you hit the draft, and then you've got basically a week and change after that, and then you hit free agency, and free agency's done in what feels like about 3 hours. It's kind of nice how that works. You really don't have to wonder for very long. It makes less writing fodder for folks like us, but we don't mind.
I like the vacation from mid-July to mid-September.
Right.
It's nice. So the other kind of wild related thing we have for today is we wrap up our season in review by checking in with the goalies, your favorite position. And this is going to be, again, much shorter than the last 2 weeks because we only have 3 players.
Well,
2.5.
You haven't got me going yet, so who knows how much shorter it's actually going to be.
True. I could make some criticism of, a goaltender, and 10 minutes later you'll still be defending that.
No comment.
I'm gonna kind of go opposite way up this list here.
Sure.
We'll start with our most frequently asked question of the podcast season. Will Alex Stalock get a call-up? Sorry, Gretchen. No, Alex Stalock, 2 games. He started twice. 151 goals against average. 944 save percentage. Obviously, small sample size, but he did what he needed to do in those 2 games. He got Dubnyk 2 nights off because there was no trust left in the other backup goaltender. And it seemingly we're kind of headed towards him battling for a backup goaltender position job this fall, which I kind of wrote about 2 weeks ago and said, well, maybe they should still try and sign somebody else. But where are you at with Alex Stalock?
I'm with you on that, and we talked about this very briefly a couple of shows ago, I believe. I think you give him a chance to battle for the job, but you went down a list in your article a couple of weeks ago about some guys that you thought it made sense for the Wild to take a look at and maybe sign, and some guys who probably have a little bit better of an NHL sample size to deal with, a little bit better of an NHL run to deal with, guys who have been backup goaltenders for a couple of years and have not worn out their welcome. So I think that's maybe going to be the situation. I don't know who they end up signing, but it's going to be somebody probably with some NHL experience, and they'll probably battle. I got to assume that they're not going to just hand Alex Stalock the backup job on a silver platter. Maybe they are. Maybe that is their plan. Maybe that's a cost savings thing for them. I don't know. I think Iowa comes into play a little bit there too, because I think Stephen McCulloch is. I don't know if they are counting on him to necessarily be the guy in Iowa. I don't know how all that works, but we'll see. We'll find out. It'll be interesting to see if they do bring in someone, because Chuck Fletcher made no bones about it. That was the one thing that he very candidly addressed in his end of the season presser was your backup goaltending needs to be a priority. And that leads me to believe that he's going to sign someone. He's going to sign someone else, and they're going to compete with Stalock. And or maybe they're very happy with having Stalock be the guy in Iowa who's your call-up guy. Maybe that's the case next season as well, and I'm not upset with that at all. I don't know that Alex Stalock has absolutely positively earned a backup NHL job just by having a good AHL season and a good 2 starts, but make him battle for it, sure.
It never hurts to have good depth at the goaltending position.
Yeah.
So having Stalock as your third goalie, is an incredible strength, and that brings us to our next goalie, who was the opposite of strength this year, Darcy Kemper. He started 17 hockey games this year, 313 goals against average, 902 save percentage, no shutouts.
No.
Go figure. It took me a while to finally jump off the ledge, and I don't know if you ever actually jumped off the ledge with him. But we kind of defended him for a good part of the year, and then I gave up because he couldn't stop a beach ball. But this was the end of the line for him.
Yeah, and I was obviously maybe the most infamous Kemper defender, at least on Twitter. But I started that around mid-season where. The first half of his season wasn't horrific. The first half of his season, he was kind of up and down, like Kemper usually is. And, looking back at the season before, he was the full-time backup to Dubnyk the season before. He posted a .915 save percentage. And Dubnyk only posted a .918 save percentage. So Kemper had a pretty decent year for an NHL backup the season before. He was Kemper. I mean, he would have good games and he would have bad games, but he evened out to a .915, which is pretty solid. That's average. And so when I started defending him around midseason this year, it was with the idea that he was going to have some good games to, in typical Kemper fashion. He was going to have a couple of good games, and that would kind of even things out a little bit. And I don't know what it was, and I never really went very far into diagnosing it, and it also didn't help the Wild played like hot garbage in the month of March, but he never had a good game again. He did not have a single solitary... I mean, he had, I think, one good game the whole second half of the season, and that was about it. And so my defense of him, hoping that he was at some point going to have a good game, really kind of fell short because he never had a good game. He'd never bounced back the way that he had, before. He had always been kind of a roller coaster, but he at least had mixed in some good games, and he just didn't do that. And it cost him, I can't imagine, quite a bit of money, I've got to assume, because next year he's probably going to be looking at an Alex Stalock kind of deal where, maybe an NHL team signs him to be the backup. I kind of doubt it. But more likely, he probably is going to be a pretty prominent AHL goaltender next season, just waiting to, play out of this funk that he's in, or to get a call up to the NHL. But I really don't see an NHL team, aside from one that's very obviously tanking, signing him to be one of their 2 goaltenders.
Well, 2 years ago in his contract dispute, he threatened to go to the KHL, so maybe he'll wind up there.
Maybe the door is still open.
I mean, nobody's going to be missing him, at least up in these parts, if he does that. So my big thing was the Wild were never comfortable giving him starts to give Dubnyk really an extended period of rest, and we're now getting to this is the second full season of Dubnyk, and 65 plus starts each year, and eventually he's going to get hurt. These things happen. The best goaltenders get hurt, whether it's for a few months or just a few weeks, but there will come a time when the Wild need a backup goaltender to be the number 1 because Dubnyk is on the injured list. Mm-hmm. And you can't clearly have Darcy Kemper be that goalie because you're going to lose all your games in 2 weeks because one goal instantly turns into 4. And so that's why it's absolutely essential that they find a backup who can be, a more consistent goaltender.
Yeah.
And that's what I kind of pointed out with each of my 5 goaltenders on that list was they were consistent, which that is something they really, really need.
Yeah.
Have I mentioned they need consistency?
Don't you hate kids?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I'm with you. And from Kemper's standpoint, too, I think this is a pretty good situation for a change of scenery. Like, he's the classic case where he's kind of, not that he was a huge prospect or anything, but he's kind of a post-type prospect a little bit. He's still pretty young. I think he's, 24, 25?
26.
Oh, 26. Oh, well, he's still relatively young. I mean, goalies are all pretty much classic late bloomers. We didn't see Devin Dubnyk's best until he was 29, 30, so I don't know. I think it's possible that we see Darcy Kemper as a starting NHL goaltender. It's just very clearly not going to be with this franchise. And that's the only way he's going to get there because, number one, he's not blocked by Dubnyk, and number two, and I'll get more into this later, but I think a different voice for him is probably going to do him a lot of good because he certainly couldn't get out of his own way this year.
The final goaltender on our list, which is nice that we only have this short list because other teams aren't as fortunate. But that is Devin Dubnyk. He started 63 games. He played in 65. 225 goals against average, 923 save percentage, 5 shutouts, which basically he really had a tale of 2 seasons. He had an incredible October, November, and December. And as I pointed out in my article this last week, he was a brick wall through December, which was a big reason why the Wild won 12 games. And then January, February, you saw him start to come back down to earth a little bit, but he was still, doing enough to where the team can win games.
Yeah.
And then March, he just absolutely nosedived.
Yeah.
Was not good, and as we often argued, was a byproduct of not being able to get a night off because the backup goaltender was not good.
Right.
Which is why they had to call up Alex Stalock to start 2 consecutive games just so Dubnyk could sit.
Right.
But that March really took away from a great season, and it cost him a Vezina nomination.
Yeah.
Carey Price jumped in and took his spot, and he was probably the Vezina winner through January.
Yeah, almost
if not
February. Yeah. And also, to a lesser extent, but who knows, cost the team the division championship, and or cost Bruce Boudreau the Jack Adams nomination. At least a nomination.
The Jack Adams is an award.
I'm not taking that award seriously. I'm just saying he wasn't nominated when he would have been.
In fact, I prefer that the coach doesn't win that because, as we've seen, it's cursed. So.
It is a President's Cup level kiss of death.
Congrats to John Tortorella, who's going to get a pink slip next year.
Does anyone? Do you know if 2015? Jack Adams winner Paul McLean. Does he have a job?
Yeah, he's still.
That's right. He's with the Ducks.
Anaheim.
Yeah, that's right.
They just replaced head coaches. They didn't actually, change out the coaching staff.
Right.
So McLean is still there.
Right.
But yeah. So I'm sorry. Condolences to John Tortorella.
Right.
Being fired.
Yeah, with Dubnyk it was, and I don't know. I'm not a complete buyer on the Dubnyk was tired, that's why he struggled thing. I think that might have something to do with it. I also think that, like Kemper, to an extent, Dubnyk is a hot and cold guy. And we certainly saw that out of him last season when it was very pronounced how hot and cold he was. I mean, again, last season he had an incredible December. He had a pretty awful January and February, and that got Mike Yeo fired. I just think he's kind of streaky like that, and I don't know how much that has to. I mean, his March last season was incredible. He was one of the 3 stars in the NHL, and he had more starts than he did this season. So I'm not 100% buyer on that. And what I'll kick off here, and maybe one of my hotter takes, something that I've brought up to you, is, and I said this last year when they brought him back, but I'm not sold on Bob Mason. I'm just not. And I said this last year. I was kind of openly disappointed when they brought him back to the coaching staff. I wasn't mad about it. I didn't think it was a terrible move, but I was like, I would have liked to see them get a different voice in here. And this year, and I don't want to say that I'm vindicated. I'm certainly not, because Dubnyk still had a fine season, had a better season than he had the year before, in fact. But his inconsistency, coupled with Kemper's complete bed crapping, it kind of leads me down that road again, where it's like, I don't know. I mean, I think Bob Mason is good, but it's one of those situations like where has his shelf life ran out? I think obviously he knows what he's doing. They've had a great history of goaltending here for the Minnesota Wild. It's been very, very limited where you've had Wild goaltending be flat out bad. I don't know that we've even ever seen that, really. They've always been middle of the pack or better. But I wonder what a different voice might do, because we see other teams, we see the Blackhawks plug in a backup who is phenomenal. We see the Rangers who, any backup they get, they plug them in, they're phenomenal. Teams like that where they don't have any kind of issue with their goaltending, because no matter who they put in there, they do well. And certainly Henrik Lundqvist makes that look easy for the Rangers, but it's been argued all over the place how good Corey Crawford actually is. I don't know. I don't know that he's an elite level goaltender, but he puts up good numbers, and Scott Darling put up even better numbers this season and earned himself a job in Carolina. So I don't know. That's just kind of my very brief hot take. As hot takey as I'm going to get is, I'm not sold on Bob Mason. I'm just not. I would like to see a different voice in here. I don't know who that voice is, other than Sean Burke, I would absolutely love, but I don't think that's happening. I've heard he would much prefer a front office type job, but he is certainly proven to be a goalie whisperer with Devin Dubnyk in his time in Arizona before he came here. So if you can find someone like that, then I like that move. But otherwise, I'm kind of, I'm skeptical, let's just say. I'm not full on, creating hashtags to run him out of town or anything like that, or writing articles to run him out of town or anything like that. But
I was going to say, so you want him fired without a solution for who should replace him?
No, I just, I don't know. At this point, I wonder if not anybody, but and a different voice would be better. You know what I mean? And maybe not Sean Burke, but maybe someone else. I don't know. But I've reached the point with just the evidence that I've seen from Wild goaltending where it's like, maybe there's a different path there. And at the end of the day, it's a goaltending coach. So yeah, I don't know how much how much influence he actually has. It's just, I don't wonder if someone might do a better job of at the very least playing more psychologist, because that was clearly Kemper's problem. And you could argue that to Dubnyk too. Dubnyk's a little bit hot. He runs a little hot sometimes, and it's not out of the realm to think that the whole month of March was a lot of focus issues from Dubnyk. So I don't wonder if that might be something. I don't think Bob Mason old school NHL goaltender. I don't know how much he works with sports psychology and what he does, but maybe that's a change worth making. I don't know.
All right, before we continue on down the Fire Bob Mason rabbit hole, we should probably move along.
That's all I got.
I feel like at some point in there I was going to add something, but you probably got to it anyway. So
yeah, maybe.
So that's kind of all we had for relevant Wild-related discussion. Before the Niederreiter Dumba news, it's been pretty quiet on the Western Front. So it's kind of hard to podcast when you have to pull things out of your rear end to talk about.
Right.
So that's why we're taking a week off next week. But don't worry, there will still be a podcast.
Yeah.
So NHL playoffs. We are watching Nashville-Anaheim Game 6 as we record. Are you paying attention still? Because my interest has really, really gone down. And I meant every word last week that all four of these teams are hateable in their own way.
Yeah, I've still caught most of the games. I haven't, I'm not diehard. It's not appointment TV for me, but it's definitely in the back of my mind because there's a game every night, so that makes it easy. Until we get to the Stanley Cup Final, and there's a game every third night, apparently.
Really?
Yeah, it's well, no, they play.
I suppose
there's 1 day between games 1 and 2, and there's 1 day between games 3 and 4, I believe.
I suppose they're really going to space it out to milk the TV coverage.
And so every other gap is 2 days.
Great.
Which is terrible. So, anyway, yeah, I just, I don't know, I've followed it. It's been interesting. I think this series, Nashville and Anaheim, has been pretty good. You can't really complain. The games, I think, have been pretty good. The Pittsburgh-Ottawa series has been kind of weird. Pittsburgh has really flattened the island or the Senators in the last 2 games, and so I don't know. It just it's been a weird playoffs. Like not just with the teams involved, but just the way that things have gone down.
These playoff series are essentially going to be the last man standing, and as I said a few days ago, it's going to be 2 AHL teams playing in the Stanley Cup Final because every team is seemingly losing a quality player a night to some sort of injury.
Yeah.
And it's just disappointing because you obviously want to market the game in your league's final, and players are dropping like flies. So that is not going to be good for the NHL. So that's all I'll say.
Yeah, no, I'm with you.
The Ducks are about to seemingly get eliminated. It has been very difficult to remain checked in, and I opted for some more fun things over the weekend, so I really didn't watch a whole lot. But I still try to keep up with it. So.
Right. Yeah, hopefully the Stanley Cup Final is good. These conference finals have been a little weird. Usually the conference finals are even better than the Cup Final, but I don't know. Maybe we do get a couple of Game 7s out of it. Who knows? I mean, that's certainly not out of the realm of possibility.
I'm kind of out of things to say on the
that's
conference finals.
I think that's where everyone's at with this year. I think this is kind of a weird off year for the NHL playoffs. Pittsburgh seems like maybe they're rolling a little bit, but I don't know. We could be wrong on that too.
It's just more adds to the frustration of the Wild ending in 5 games.
Yeah.
Where they were a relatively healthy bunch. And you see these teams drop like flies in the playoffs.
Yeah.
You kind of go, what could have been?
Yep.
Oh, well. That's Minnesota motto. What could have been? Oh, boy. Jerseys.
Here to start the third period. What team is this? It's not Team USA. Well, yes, it is. They've got on new uniforms. They're wearing the logo of the Duck. I've never seen this before.
So we're kind of just meandering on for jersey-related things to talk about while we wait for the inevitable Adidas switch. So we figured we'd kind of maybe go over some of our favorite NCAA hockey jerseys on this podcast, of which I forgot to look up at work today, so I have to do some research on the fly.
I did. I looked at a little bit, and I came across, it didn't really strike me until I looked it up, but it feels like, and I could be wrong, it feels like on the whole, colleges do a better job with jerseys than the pros do. It just seemed like it's much more of a simplistic design, and maybe it's just the fact that the Reebok hasn't gotten a hold of any of those teams. I was looking around, I was like, oh yeah, those are good jerseys, and yeah, that's a pretty good jersey too, and it just seems like a lot of the jerseys in the NCAA look pretty good, and they've got a good identity, and they haven't gone bonkers with changing a whole lot of things and adding a whole lot of weird piping and silly logos and that sort of stuff. So I don't know. I think that on the whole NCAA does a pretty good job, and we certainly see it around here. I think the Gophers have had a pretty decent jersey history. You've covered that yourself in article form before. I think that they look pretty good. St. Cloud State has kind of a very classic look. Minnesota Duluth has a very classic look, and I think all of those teams do pretty good. The Mavericks, Mankato, I'm not wild about their uniforms typically. They're a little more on the modern side, I would say, of type of designs that I'm not really crazy about. And then there's, that team up there, like northwest of us. Their jerseys aren't actually terrible either. Sometimes, when they're court ordered to remove their nickname, I guess, you can only do so much with a jersey. But, I think some of their jerseys under their former name weren't terrible for what they were. They had a decent look going on. But yeah, I don't know. There's a couple of Big Ten schools that kind of try to look like their football teams.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of that.
I don't hate it. If it's your school's identity, you're a football school, and Penn State, Ohio State, Michigan, very much football schools. As maybe as disrespectful as that is to college hockey, I guess, at least it's on brand. Right. So I don't hate it in that regard. As far as the looks themselves, I don't think it looks terrible. Michigan looks a little goofy, obviously, but the other one's not so bad.
Is the one team I can kind of understand,
right?
Because they've been around for quite a while,
right?
It's just the Ohio States and the Penn States that kind of take issue with, and if it wasn't for that stripe on the helmet, I'd actually probably say Penn State has a decent set of jerseys.
They do.
But I like Michigan's jerseys as well. Maybe not the winged helmet, but that's expected from Michigan.
Right.
I guess my personal favorites are the Gophers, obviously.
Yeah.
And I think UMD has a pretty solid look. Can't believe I'm complimenting UMD. And I've also been weirdly kind of a fan of Maine's look.
That was one that I saw as well.
They got the different shades of blue, and then the kind of script Maine going on the front of the jersey.
Mm-hmm.
Just a kind of a cleaner look.
Yep.
So those are kind of my personal favorites. I'm kind of curious to see what Arizona State is gonna offer as they join college hockey next year.
Right.
I'm just trying to think of any others that I really like, but
Another one that comes to mind for me is Boston College with the red and the white. It's a very simple set. It's it just says Boston essentially on the front, but
Boston College or Boston University?
Oh, sorry, Boston University.
I was going to say.
I had them flipped. Yeah, Boston College. I don't know. I'm not wild about the gold jerseys. But there's something about the simplicity of the Boston University
I would agree with
that I kind of dig. I was looking around at some jerseys today, and somebody brought up Alaska Anchorage as being a pretty solid jersey. I think that logo is kind of weird, but regionally I think it works. I think they're going for a very local look with that, similar to like the Phoenix Coyotes, even though there is no such thing as a Seawolf, as the fans at Mariucci Arena will tell you.
They say a lot of things.
Yeah, true. But yeah, I think it's pretty solid looks. I think it's pretty rare that you see a college hockey team and you're like, bleh, what are those jerseys? Good Lord. There's some that are maybe too simple, and maybe Boston University is guilty of that, but I think for the most part they do a pretty good job of it. I think it hasn't been too tainted and commercialized, but they've also been, I don't know, just commercialized enough to where they're willing to make some, they want to make some good looking jerseys.
I think that's all I got for good college hockey jerseys.
Right.
As for most hateable jerseys, well, it's no secret that there's that team from UND. I don't care what they wear. They might as well be wearing garbage cans. Yeah, so that's what I got for that.
How long until the hockey romper?
Please no.
They're like Cooperalls, but
it took copious amounts of alcohol just to get the image of you in a romper out of my head after you tweeted whatever kind of romper you were looking for.
Coleslaw print.
Else. Yeah, there you go.
I didn't even at you when you found that tweet. It set off your romper dar.
Yeah, just say no to rompers. There you go. There's your title.
All right. It's topical.
Yeah, that will probably wrap it up for us.
Didn't we get questions or no?
Oh, we did.
I was wondering if you were going to get to that or not.
Well, it took...
I don't think we got many.
Earlier in the day for questions to finally kick in.
Okay.
But that's funny that I did almost forget.
Yeah. Well, we can kill some time with those. Huh? We got time.
Let's see here. First question in the mailbag from Mark McNeil. Obviously hypothetical, but if all parties agreed, would you trade Parise and Zucker for Ovechkin? Well, yes. If there's a way to get me out of the Zach Parise contract, then by God, I am for it.
Well, not to mention, I don't know how much time is left on Ovechkin's contract. I don't think it's 8 years.
I think he's got like 4, 5, 6 years.
Yeah,
something
but
like that.
Also, and we've said this with criticisms of Parise before.
4 years.
Oh, nice.
I'm all for that.
Yeah. Whatever movie scene you want to edit in where somebody like very exasperatedly dives across the room to slap a big red button. Insert that here for me, because I will make that trade 8 days a week. Again, also because of Parise's contract, but at the same time, you're getting Alexander freaking Ovechkin. So, there is that too.
That's a nice thought. Yes, I would say yes to that. Serious mashup. Why is everybody crazy about signing Oshie? Hey, I'm right there with you, pal. I just say no to him, as we hit on earlier.
Just say no-she.
No, God! No, God, please, no! 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 No!
There we go.
You can make that a hashtag.
I will.
Or you better consult with the hashtag expert before you do.
I don't need to consult him for anything.
That's true.
It can't be as bad as Twins DP.
Yeah. So yeah, we are anti-Oshie on this podcast.
Yeah, I mean, it's because he scored a lot of goals this year, because he apparently made a stop in Ward, Minnesota for a night. Those are the reasons, and I understand. People don't know much about him. They don't see much of him other than they very vividly remember him in Sochi, and so they think he's some uber talented player who is scoring 30 to 40 goals a season because he's an uber talented player. Well, I mean, he's talented. I'm not going to take that away from him. I think he's a good player, like you said. He's a good, secondary scorer. But without Ovechkin and Backstrom, he's not putting up those kind of numbers again. So,
and last question from State of Stats: which is most exciting, soccer, NBA, or Pittsburgh versus Ottawa? Well, if I'm going to put these in order, I'm going to go soccer 1, Pittsburgh versus Ottawa 2, NBA 3, because the NBA playoffs have been absolute garbage.
Yeah,
I've tried to watch for a little bit, but they're just so bad.
Any series that Golden State or Cleveland hasn't been involved in, I guess, has been good. I haven't seen much of it. I guess the Celtics and Wizards series was pretty good. I didn't catch any of it. But then last night's game was all right. It had a good ending, I guess, the Celtics Cavaliers. This is what happens. This is what the NBA. I don't even know that you can say they allow it anymore. They damn near encourage it. The creation of these obscene super teams, and it just it doesn't. As much as we've complained about the NHL playoffs being kind of weird, at least most of the games have been competitive, which you definitely can't say for the conference finals in the NBA. I mean, the Celtics game, like I said, the Celtics beat the Cavaliers. That was the first game out of 5 that has been even competitive in the NBA playoffs in the conference finals.
It's incredible that Cleveland lost a game.
Right.
Cleveland and Golden State were
and people freaked it out and called it like the biggest upset, and from a spread standpoint, it was, I guess, but people were acting like the Celtics had just won the damn title because they won one game against the Cavaliers in the conference finals. That's how bad the NBA playoffs are. For me, I'm not a big soccer guy, so you kind of know my stance there. I am moderately excited for the NBA final. I do want to see Golden State and Cleveland go. That will be good, and hopefully, fingers crossed, the NHL puts up something even remotely close to as exciting. I mean, it won't get nearly the play because it's not 2 super teams. But the NHL actually has an iota of parity, so there's that. So I don't know. I'm moderately excited for the NBA Finals. I'm cautiously optimistic for the NHL Stanley Cup Final, and soccer, I still mostly don't understand.
I mean, you did come to my house for the first 2 Minnesota United games.
I did.
So,
I will claim that I've been a fan since day one if they ever win anything.
They're not doing terrible right
Dark
now.
clouds.
Now you're just saying things. Well, that's all we got in the mailbag this week. Thank you for those who put questions in.
Yeah, big thanks.
Otherwise, we would have probably just ad-libbed with Baby Zucker talk for 10 minutes.
I forgot about that until just now.
So that was nice.
Yeah.
Now that can probably wrap it up.
Yeah, sure.
For us. So we are off for Memorial Day weekend.
Yes.
But what we do have in store for you is a kind of a highlight show, or a clip show, if you will, that it was meant to come out along with our 100th episode to kind of celebrate that, but this project certainly took time, and time we didn't have a whole lot of.
Right.
So it took us a while to get it out, but it is now here to fill your Memorial Day weekend, wherever
Yes.
you may be, and it's just a collection of our favorite moments, or at least your favorite moments. I was just mainly along drunkenly.
Right.
Yeah, there's some good sound bites in there, so be sure to check that out on Sunday. We'll probably put that up at some point.
Yeah.
But I did get a listen at it, and it's probably worth the time.
Yeah.
And you can learn some origin stories, and you can learn the Big Omelet story if
Right.
you've never heard that, because some people on Twitter still don't get the Big Omelet story. So
Right.
we gotta get that out there.
Right.
But yeah, anyway, that'll wrap it up for us, and we'll be back a couple weeks, hopefully with some kind of relevant news to talk about. And
Yeah, if not, we've got some guests.
that's true. We do have some guests lined up. Hopefully that
Doesn't fall through again.
right. But Dad's schedules kind of override
Very much so.
podcasts with us, so I understand. But yeah, you can follow Ben and I on Twitters at Ben Remington, at Giles Farrell. Follow the podcast on Twitter at GATG Wild Podcast. And find our podcast and our collected writing works at zonecoverage.com. You can hear this on Libsyn, Stitcher, iTunes. Drop us a rating if you ever so can. And yeah, that should do it. So thanks for listening to us this week, and we will catch you again next week.
Later.
St. Paul, Minnesota.
Minneapolis, Minnesota.
We are ducks, and ducks fly together.
That's not resiliency. You're making it sound like we're good. That's all. I'm done.